My son looked at me the way you look at someone who just said something in a language you don't speak. Was the $1,200 I sent every month enough for everything? I asked. For rent, groceries, books? He set his fork down on the restaurant table, slowly. The kind of slow that happens when your brain is catching up to your ears. What, $1,200? Across the table, my ex-husband reached for his water glass and didn't drink from it. His mother, who had insisted on joining us for my son's 20th birthday dinner, suddenly remembered she needed to use the restroom. I didn't call after her. I didn't look at my ex-husband. I kept my eyes on my son. The money, I said. I've been sending it every month since you started at State. For 2 years. He shook his head once, very slightly, the way people do when something doesn't compute. Mom, I've been working 3 jobs. The restaurant was loud around us. Someone at the next table was laughing. A server walked by with a birthday dessert and a sparkler. My son sat there in a shirt I didn't recognize, with shadows under his eyes I hadn't seen in the photos his father sent me, and told me he'd been working 3 jobs. I thought you didn't care, he said quietly. Then he caught himself. I mean, Grandma said you were really busy with the new contracts, that you were doing your best, that I shouldn't ask. I nodded once. I didn't say anything yet. His father cleared his throat from across the table and said we should order dessert. I told him to be quiet. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the part that came before it. I was 26 when I had my son, 28 when I realized my marriage was something I'd been surviving rather than living inside. By 30, I was divorced, working as a traveling nurse, and trying to figure out how to be present in my child's life from whatever hospital city I landed in every 13 weeks. My ex-husband and I had managed to be civil, which I used to consider an achievement. He had primary residence because I moved too often for a court to assign custody any other way, and I told myself that was okay. My son had a stable home. He had his father, his grandmother, his school, his friends. I sent money and came back whenever the contract allowed, and on the weeks I wasn't there, I called. Or I tried to call. My son hit 16 and turned into what I assumed was a typical teenager. Short texts, one-word answers, long stretches where he'd read a message and not respond until the next day. His grandmother told me he was just going through a phase, that boys his age pull away from everyone, that it wasn't personal. His father said the same thing. I believed them because I wanted to, because the alternative was admitting that something was wrong and I was 2 states away and couldn't fix it. When he got into State on a partial scholarship, I was proud in a way that made my chest hurt. He called me himself that night, and we talked for 40 minutes, and he sounded like my kid again, and I thought, okay, we made it through the hard part. His father called me a week later about the money. His grandmother had set up a joint account years ago for international transfers. Her sister sent money from overseas, and the account had better rates, fewer conversion fees. My ex suggested I use the same account to send my son's monthly support. Easier, he said. Less hassle than opening a new one. My son was 18 and still figuring out direct deposit and debit cards. It made sense. That's the part I keep coming back to. It made sense at the time. I set up the automatic transfer, $1,200 every month, on the 1st, like a utility bill, $400 for shared housing near campus, $400 for groceries and transportation, $400 for books, lab fees, whatever else. I watched the confirmations hit my phone every month for 2 years and assumed they were landing where I intended. I sent care packages too. A winter coat his sophomore year when the temperature dropped earlier than forecast. A gift card on his birthday. A handwritten letter in November when I couldn't get a flight home for Thanksgiving. He never mentioned the coat, never thanked me for the gift card. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he was 20 and boys his age don't always remember to say thank you. I told myself a lot of things. His grandmother called me the week before his birthday and suggested I come down for dinner, that it would mean a lot to him. She sounded warm. She sounded like a woman who wanted her family together. I bought a plane ticket that afternoon. I did not know, until the moment he said, what $1,200, that I had been buying a plane ticket to walk into the thing she had built. After dinner, after his father paid the bill without looking at me, and his grandmother reappeared from the bathroom with a composed expression and an excuse about needing to get up early, After they both left, and my son and I sat alone in the parking lot of that restaurant for an hour in my rental car with the engine off, I learned what 2 years had actually looked like for him. He'd taken a job at a coffee shop the week classes started because he didn't have money for the meal plan. He picked up a second job at a grocery store by October. By his second semester, he was doing weekend shifts at a warehouse, 20 minutes off campus, because the first two jobs weren't enough to cover rent and textbooks and the power bill. His roommates split 4 ways. He'd slept 4 hours a night through finals both years. He'd eaten rice and frozen vegetables for dinner 3 weeks straight 1 month when a shift got cut and the budget didn't stretch. He'd borrowed his roommate's old laptop when his broke because he couldn't afford to replace it. He told me all of this flatly, not for sympathy, just as facts. The way someone recounts a difficult stretch that's over. The way people talk about things they've already survived and filed away. "Grandma said you were stretched thin," he said. "She said you had your own stuff going on, that I needed to be self-sufficient. That's what adults do. Did she say I didn't love you?" He was quiet for a moment. "No. She just made me feel like asking for more would be too much, like I'd be a burden." I closed my eyes. "I sent the coat," I said, "for your birthday in October, a blue one, and a gift card." He turned to look at me. I never got a coat. I knew then, before I'd looked at a single bank record, before I'd called anyone or pulled up any account on my phone. I knew the way you know something terrible before you've confirmed it, because every piece of the shape fits, even when you can't see the whole picture. I drove us to his apartment. He made tea with a kettle that had a cracked handle held together with electrical tape. I sat at his kitchen table and opened my banking app and looked at 24 months of transfers. All confirmed, all cleared, all gone to an account my son had never touched. Then I asked him to show me his bank statements. His actual account, the one his father had helped him open when he started college. No deposits from me. Not one, not in 2 years. I didn't fall apart in front of him. I've made a point my whole adult life of not falling apart in front of my son. I kept my voice level and I asked him if I could use his bathroom, and I stood over his sink for 4 minutes with the water running and just breathed. When I came back out, he was sitting on the couch with his hands on his knees, looking at the wall. "They kept it," he said. Not a question. "I'm going to find out exactly what happened, and then I'm going to fix it." He nodded slowly. "I thought you just didn't want to be involved anymore, after the divorce. I thought maybe it was easier for you if we weren't so close." That one I couldn't keep off my face. He saw it and looked away. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have called you directly. You were told not to make things harder for me. That's not on you." He didn't say anything else. He just sat there, and I sat beside him, and we stayed like that until it was late enough that I made him go to sleep because he had a morning shift. I didn't sleep. I had a friend from nursing school who'd gone to law school instead of continuing in medicine. Her name was Dana, and she was the kind of person who responded to crisis texts at midnight with calm, practical sentences instead of panic. I texted her from my son's couch at 1 a.m. She called me back in 10 minutes. "Walk me through it," she said. I did. The account setup, the 2 years of transfers, the coat he never received, the gift card, the letters I'd mailed that he'd apparently never gotten either. The way his grandmother had been subtly, consistently, carefully, building a story in which I was an absent mother who cared more about her career than her child. "Do you have records of the transfers?" "Every single one." "Do you have any texts or messages where you specified the money was for your son?" I thought back. When I set it up, I texted his father. I said, "Here's the setup for Marcus's monthly support." I used those words. "Screenshot that tonight before anything gets deleted." I already had my phone out. "And the gifts?" "I have shipping confirmation for the coat, delivered to his father's address, signed for." Dana was quiet for a second. "This is not a small thing. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to understand exactly how big it is." "Get me everything. We'll talk in the morning." I spent the next 2 hours pulling records, transfer confirmations, the text thread from 2 years ago where I'd said, clearly, that the $1,200 was Marcus's support money, and could his father please make sure it transferred to Marcus's account within a few days of the first. The shipping receipt, the gift card purchase confirmation, photographs I'd texted during holidays that had been read and never responded to, a pattern, laid out in timestamps and receipts, that told a different story than the one his grandmother had been whispering in his ear. The next morning, I called his father. He picked up on the third ring, sounding like he hadn't slept either. "We should talk," I said. "I can explain." "I'm not interested in an explanation. I'm interested in the money." Silence. "Where did it go?" I asked. He started with logistics. The account, the fees, the way the transfers had come in, and the way he'd intended to move them over, but things had gotten complicated, and his mother had suggested, and the situation with the business had been— "What business?" Another silence. Longer this time. His girlfriend had opened a boutique the previous year. Clothing, accessories, locally made goods. It had started small, and then it needed inventory, and then it needed a better location, and then it needed a new point of sale system, and somewhere in that sequence, over 24 months, $28,000. And $800 that I had sent for my son's groceries and textbooks, and rent had funded a storefront in a strip mall 12 minutes from the house. My son couldn't afford to heat properly. "You let him work 3 jobs," I said. "He needed to learn." I hung up. Dana met me at a coffee shop near my hotel with a yellow legal pad and a very specific look on her face that I recognized as the expression she made when she was already 3 steps ahead of a problem. "Tell me about the girlfriend's business," she said. I told her everything his father had said, and then I pulled up the boutique's Instagram, which his girlfriend updated regularly, and which contained 2 years of inventory growth, funded, in part, by my son's grocery money. Dana looked at the Instagram for a long moment. "Does she know where the money came from?" "I don't know. It matters less legally than you might think. The liability for the misappropriation sits with him." She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "You have texts establishing the purpose of the funds. You have transfer records. You have your son's bank statements showing none of it reached him. You have delivery confirmation for gifts that were received by the address and never given to him." She looked up. "This is conversion, possibly fraud, definitely civil, potentially criminal, depending on how aggressively we want to pursue it. I want my son to not have to work 3 jobs anymore," I said. "I want him to sleep. I want him to finish school without borrowing his roommate's laptop. That's where I want to start." "Then let's start there." We sent a formal demand letter to my ex-husband's attorney within the week. Full repayment of the misappropriated funds, documentation of how the money had been used, and a sworn accounting of what remained. We also flagged, very clearly, that we had records sufficient to support a criminal referral if the matter wasn't resolved through civil channels. His attorney called Dana 2 days later. His father wanted to negotiate. He said he could repay a portion now and set up a payment plan for the rest. He said things had gotten out of hand, but there had been no intent to harm. He said his mother had meant well, had only wanted to encourage Marcus to be independent. Dana told his attorney that independent and deliberately impoverished were 2 different things, and that if they wanted to discuss intent, we were happy to let a judge sort it out. We went to court. I had expected his father to come in contrite. He didn't. His attorney tried the implied gift angle first, which was remarkable, given that I had a text message where I'd written the words Marcus's support money in a sentence that contained no ambiguity whatsoever. The judge asked to see the text. His attorney pivoted. Then they tried the mother was absent, and the grandmother stepped in to raise this child argument, which I had also anticipated, and which Dana dismantled with 2 years of flight records showing every visit I'd made, every school event I'd attended, every holiday I'd been present for when contracts allowed. His mother took the stand. She was good. She was composed and soft-spoken, and she talked about doing what was best for Marcus, the way people talk about something they genuinely believe, which is the part that was hardest to sit through. She had decided at some point that her version of best for Marcus was a version in which he didn't need me, and in which she was the one who had held everything together. She'd built that story carefully, over years, with just enough truth wrapped around the edges to make it hold. His father was less composed on the stand. When Dana asked him directly whether he had ever transferred the monthly support funds to Marcus's account, he said the situation had been complicated. When she asked him to define what specifically had been complicated about clicking a button on a banking app, his attorney objected. The judge overruled it and asked him to answer the question. He admitted he hadn't transferred the money to Marcus. He said he'd intended to. He said things had gotten away from him. He said his girlfriend's business had needed support and he'd made a bad decision and he was sorry. The judge looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who has heard many bad decisions described as accidentally having gotten away from people. The ruling came down in our favor: full repayment, legal fees, damages. His father didn't have $28,800 liquid. As it turned out, most of what he had was tied up in the boutique: the inventory, the fixtures, the equipment, the lease he'd co-signed for his girlfriend's store. The business had been funded almost entirely with my son's support money, and the business's assets were therefore subject to the judgment. His girlfriend's attorney argued strenuously that her client was an innocent party. The judge was sympathetic and also unmoved. The assets were traceable. The judgment was clear. I did not take pleasure in watching someone else's business come apart. I want to say that clearly. His girlfriend had built something real, even if she'd built it on a foundation she hadn't known was rotten. That part wasn't fair, and I knew it. But my son had eaten rice and vegetables for 3 weeks straight in the dark of a cold apartment while her store stocked new inventory. The scales had to come back to level somewhere. The boutique's fixtures and remaining inventory were liquidated as part of the settlement. The cash value, combined with a payment plan for the remainder, brought the total within reach of what was owed. His father signed paperwork that would follow him for years. His mother did not face criminal charges. Dana and I had discussed it. My son asked me, quietly, whether we were going to pursue that. I told him it was his call as much as mine. He thought about it for a long moment. "I don't want to spend the next 2 years in a courtroom," he said. "I want to go to sleep." We didn't pursue it. The day after the final judgment, I called my son. He answered on the first ring, which is new. We talk differently now. There's less pausing, less of the careful way he used to word things, like he was worried about saying too much. "It's done," I told him. "Yeah?" He sounded tired, but lighter than tired, which I am learning to recognize as the sound of relief. "I'm setting up the account transfer today. Your name only, direct to your bank, starting the 1st of next month." He was quiet for a second. "You don't have to do the full—" "I know I don't have to." He didn't argue. He said thank you, which is something he's always been good at saying and something I always knew came from a real place, not from being told to. "Do you need anything right now?" I asked, before the 1st. He paused. "My laptop fan is making a noise. I've been scared to close it because I don't know if it'll open again." I laughed. He laughed too. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh like that in longer than I wanted to calculate. I ordered him a laptop that afternoon, shipped to his apartment, his name on the label. I went back to my current contract, which was in a city I'd grown to like, a mid-size hospital with good colleagues and a decent apartment I'd found furnished. I had 2 more months on the assignment, and then I was going to look for something permanent, somewhere I could put down a real lease. Closer to him. Close enough to drive for a weekend rather than fly. We video call every Sunday now. He shows me whatever he's studying, which I understand most of because I know medicine, and he laughs at me when I get something wrong. He quit the warehouse job and scaled back to 1 shift a week at the coffee shop, not for the money, he said, but because he likes the routine of it. He's sleeping. I can tell because the shadows under his eyes are gone, and he finishes sentences without trailing off. He told me one night, without making it into a big thing, that he'd stopped following his grandmother on social media. His father he still texts occasionally, short exchanges, birthday messages. He hasn't cut him off entirely. He's 20 years old, and that's his choice to make. I did not tell him what to feel about any of it. I know what it is to grow up figuring out how to categorize people who were supposed to love you and didn't quite manage it. That math takes time, and it's different for everyone, and it's not something another person can calculate for you. What I can tell him is this, and I have, once directly, without making it dramatic or overwrought. You were never a burden. You were never too much. You were never optional. He nodded when I said it, the way he does when he's accepting something and filing it somewhere he'll come back to. "I know," he said. "I think I always knew. Somewhere. They were just louder." That's the thing about people who want you to believe something false. They have to keep saying it. They have to repeat it and reinforce it, and make sure you never have enough quiet to hear the truth underneath. The moment you get a little silence, a little distance, a little space to think for yourself, The whole architecture falls apart. 2 years of my son eating cereal for dinner while a boutique stocked new shelves. 2 years of him pulling double shifts while transfer confirmations hit my phone and I thought everything was fine. 2 years of his grandmother's careful, soft voice telling him that asking for his mother was being a burden, that needing things was weakness, that growing up meant learning not to expect anything from anyone. He did grow up, just not the way she intended. He's going to be a good doctor someday, if that's still what he wants. He called me 2 weeks ago to tell me he was thinking about environmental science instead, something he'd gotten interested in through a professor he liked. I told him I'd read whatever he wanted to send me. He sent me a 40-page paper on watershed restoration at midnight, and I read the whole thing. I don't know yet what the next version of my life looks like in the details. I know it involves a permanent address and a shorter drive to his campus, and maybe a small apartment near a park I can run in before shifts. I know it involves Sundays on video call and dinners when we can manage it, and a kind of closeness we had to lose before we could build it back properly. That's enough to move toward. And for the first time in years, when I set my phone down at night, I'm not waiting for something to go wrong. I'm not bracing. I'm just breathing. It turns out breathing is a thing you forget you're allowed to do until someone stops standing on your chest. Did I handle it the right way? I don't know. I know I handled it the only way I could and still sleep at night. Some people will say family is family and you don't take family to court. I used to believe that too. And then I found out my son had borrowed a laptop and skipped meals for 2 years while his grandmother told him not to be a burden. I'd love to know what you think. Leave it in the comments, and if this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.